Hi, welcome to Midlands RC, and this is it's a fairly long video of the HPI Vorza, and we're going to do a few. We're going to replace the rear differential, and we'll go through what actually happened with that and give it a whole overall clean. So this is just it's got a custom body on there. It doesn't fit too well. So the spoiler's taken a bit of a beating as well, and we'll go through how the differential works quickly. So if you can see on the front wheels, one wheel spins in a forward direction and the other in the back, and then the back wheels, they're both spinning very freely and they're both going in the same direction. We'll give you a quick look at it now. It's a fairly upgraded HPI Vorza with a lot of D8 horror parts on there, the shock towers, it's got the standard 2200 kV motor, Castle Creations ESC. So we've got a 44 tooth spur gear, and here's the quick part number for you. That's going to go on at a later stage. It's got the upgraded rear springs because we go out bashing quite often. It's got the T-bone front and rear bumpers, and they really help to save A-arms, wheels, all the rest of it. So now we're going to start taking the car apart to get to the rear differential. The rear spoiler needs to come off first. So I'll try and give you a bit of a look at what's actually happened to the rear differential. The bearing from the drive shaft from the center differential keeps on popping out of the rear diff, and so it's not turning the motor or the wheels. So we're going to start speeding through a little bit more of the process here, just to try and get the whole rear section off the car, and that's going to happen by firstly taking off the rear T-bone bumper, and there's 4 screws underneath which you just need to take out. They're the extra long screws which come with the T-bone bumper, and make sure if you do put them on that you use them, because obviously the bumpers are a little bit thicker. So make sure you either try and keep all your nuts, bolts and screws in a safe place. I normally use a couple of Tupperware boxes just to separate everything, or try and put them back into the holes where you've taken them out of whilst you're still working on the vehicle. So there's a couple of screws which hold, which go into the top of the rear differential from the chassis. It's I guess it's the brace, which firstly need to come out. And then you can pull the whole rear section off the car. So it looks like one of the bearings did fail, because you can see all of the ball bearings just on the chassis there. So it's the first time taking apart the whole rear differential and the rear section of the Vorza. So I'm having a good look around, seeing exactly where all the gears and all the bevel gears are, just to work out what if I can replace the existing part, or if I need to put a new part on there. And as you can see, just about coming up here, some of the washers which look to be completely fried and completely mangled from whatever's been eating it up inside the differential. So just looking now how to actually free the differential from the whole rear section, and you'll see I'll be using this little toothbrush a fair few times just to clean out any of the existing hex heads, because then you can get the Allen key properly into there. And the front and rear little steel plates which have long pins going through your A-arms both need to come off, and I believe it's the 2 center screws on each of the front and rear which will free up your A-arms and give you a little bit more space to work on it. So we're going to take the wheels off as well now, just so we can get just so it doesn't keep rolling around. And then there's 4 screws which hold the back of the sway bar into the differential, which need to come out, because that holds everything in place as well. So after this, you can see I'm able to take the whole differential off the rear assembly, and we can start having a bit more of an in-depth look into what's actually gone on and what's broken inside. Start taking it apart. So everything, obviously, this car's been it's been through the mud, the water, up massive hills, through quarries. It's got a lot of dirt stuck in there, and the differential's pretty stiff. And it's obviously just put too much pressure on it, and it's eating itself up. So so we're going to start getting inside it now and just see how the diff oil's done, if all the gears are intact, and if it's still essentially working inside. So it's pretty heavy, sticky oil that they use inside the diff, anywhere between 3 and 10,000 weight oil normally, and I'm sure most of you have already seen the inside of what a differential looks like, but there's normally 4 bevel gears, and they're interlocked with each other, which gives it the open differential.
Kiss me up before you go. Summertime sadness. I just wanted you to know that baby you're the best.
So I've almost given up with this diff, not having any luck with it, and here's one I bought earlier, about to come out now. So it's already been greased up, and it's already been filled up with 5,000 weight diff oil in the back as well. just in case none of you see me doing that during this process. It runs a lot more freely. We're just going to check if it's the same dimensions, and hopefully it's going to be a straight replacement into the Vorza.
I just wanted you to know that baby, you're the best.
So the shaft on the old differential needs to come out, just so we can try and use it on the new one. But as you'll be able to see in a minute, it's unsuccessful. And luckily, I had a spare one I had a spare dog bone lying around.
I just wanted you to know that baby, you're the best.
Put that away, and we're going to start cleaning up the rear assembly a little bit, just so we can, seeing as we're taking it all apart, we'll get it looking all nice and clean again.
I got that summertime sadness. Summertime sadness.
I normally just use a couple of old paintbrushes and a toothbrush, and some WD-40 normally does the trick as well. Keeps everything protected. So you can see we're just giving it all a good clean, getting all the muck and dirt and dust out of it, and then once we're done, we'll give it a quick wipe down with a little hand towel, and then we can start working on the next little bit.
Summertime sadness. I just wanted you to know that baby, you're the best.
Okay, so now we've almost got the whole rear assembly cleaned up, and now we're going to try and work out how the diff goes back in, and make sure we get all the pins, screws, and bolts all in the right place, so it's fairly solid in there as it was before. So the first thing we're going to need to do is reconnect the sway bar, and you're going to need to take the screws and the little clips from the old sway bar across to the new one. So what we're going to do is just quickly take them off, give them a good clean, and just to get all the muck out, and then we can put the sway bar back in place on the new differential casing, which gives us a good base to start working off. Now these are Phillips head screws, so just be careful to put plenty of pressure on and try not to let the screw slip, otherwise you'll mess up the screw head. They're rubbish compared to hexes. So we're going to start putting the screws that go into the differential back into the shock tower. You can see I've just given them a little bit of a clean up, and make sure, obviously, because there is a few different size screws, so make sure you've remembered which holes they actually go into. So you can see these two spotlights I'm using as well, and they work brilliantly for working on little intricate parts of the car. Some people use a head torch, some people use these, and they were a brilliant eBay find. I think they're about eight or £10 each, and they work off little 3-watt bulbs. So also be very sure when you're putting the differential back in place that you put the two drive shafts that go to each wheel into the little dog bone holes of the drive shaft of the differential, and just make sure it's all lined up, because otherwise you won't be able to put them in afterwards. So I don't like these screws that they use on the bottom of the that go into the A-arm and hold the suspension and the shock in place. So I'm going to replace them with 3M 22mm screws from HPI, which have a hex on there. And here you can see that they're both pretty much the same size, and when you do put them back in, I normally don't over tighten them, just so it gives the bottom of the suspension arm a little bit of slack to move around freely within the bracket there of the A-arm. So for the time being, we've finished working on the rear assembly of the car, and give the whole area a little bit of a wipe down, and we'll get the rest of the car and the chassis back in place on the desk, so we can give it a whole clean, take it all apart, and make sure it's all still in good working order. It's good to give it a clean every now and then. Take it all apart just so that there's not loads of rubbish trapped in there, and that everything runs nice and freely, and that you can put, that you lube it all up with either a little bit of oil, a little bit of chain lube, or even just if you just use WD-40. So we'll get the other two wheels off. So the front wheels seem to be moving fairly freely. We're going to start off by taking out the battery casing, and there's, I believe, a couple of screws from the top end of the chassis, and you just take the rubber casing off first and unscrew the couple of screws in there. And as you can see, there's a fair bit of muck in there. And then now a couple of screws to take out the ESC, and it's just the two screws. The screw nearest to the plastic casing there is just obviously to hold the plastic casing on the side. Give that all a good clean. So it's a little bit tricky getting the ESC free from its little casing. There's quite a stiff plastic kind of bracket that goes all the way around the ESC and keeps the wires in place. So I'll just cut that out, but I'm sure you'll have fun getting that free as well. Let's get all the muck out. Now I normally get quite a few little stones and everything stuck within the ESC, and even potentially within the holes that just where the fan is. So just trying to get everything out and make sure the ESC and the fan are able to run freely and without all the congestion of dust and dirt within it all. So now we can get that out of the way and start working on the rest of the chassis and getting all the little nooks and crannies. A little bit more WD-40, and we are going to take off the remaining battery casing for the front just in a minute as well. So let's give the casing a quick going over as well. Again, just get all the dust out of it, get a little bit of WD-40 into it, and get stuck right in there. So it looks like I've cross-threaded one of the screws that go into the chassis here a little bit, but we'll see when we put it back together if it all goes in nicely. So again, just get right in everywhere with your little brush, your toothbrush, your paintbrush, whatever it is. Get right in on all the little areas. Move the front wheels from side to side to get into all the little places there, and just try and get all the dust and dirt out. So I'm sure some of you probably can do this the high-tech way with an air compressor, but I'm doing it the old-fashioned way and just give it a good blow. Final piece now of the cleaning process, and now we start to put it all back together. So all back in reverse order. Put the front part of the battery tray back in, then the back, then your ESC casing and the ESC, and then we can work on starting to put the rear differential and the whole rear assembly back onto the chassis. So now we're going to start working on getting the lining up the differential and the rear of the car. Get the centered drive shaft with the dog bones on there. Just again, make sure it's all straight. Give it a bit of a roll around on a flat surface, and obviously you've got to put it in place into your center diff and the rear diff at the same time, so you can screw and bolt everything back into place. And now we start working on the front and the rear plate of the rear assembly, which essentially hooks onto, or there's a long pin which goes through from the front to the rear and through your A-arm on each side, and then they screw back in. Just be careful to put them in the right order. Maybe line it up on the chassis as I'm doing here, because there's a little nodule in the middle of the front one, and that lines up as I'm just showing you here now. Okay, so run out of memory on the GoPro, and so the rest of it is gonna get filmed in little clips on the iPhone. So I've put the two screws in on the front of that metal plate, which go into the diff, and then make sure you also just line up the two long rods that go into the A-arms. The two long screws, again, so that's it's the shorter screws that go into the front of the diff, and it's got the little nodule that comes down in the middle, which shows you it's the front plate. Again, so line up the two long pins that go through the A-arm, and then you're going to attach the back plate, and it's the very long screws that will go through the whole of from the plate all the way through the diff casing there. And then again, like I say, make sure you line up all of the 4 slots for the pins that go into your A-arms, as we're just showing over here. Otherwise you'll have to take it all apart and then reposition everything again and get it all in. And you can see there the diff's already been greased up a little bit. So I've got a fair bit of travel within the suspension. I've still got some room to play on the screws, as we're just showing there. So I could give it a little bit more height and a bit more travel. I've gone for the orange springs, which are the stiffest. I don't think they're the longest, but they're the stiffest springs that you can get, obviously because we do a little bit more bashing. Now, just trying to show you that the dog bone drive shaft has all made its has all been kind of locked into place here. Now I have forgotten to put the 2 screws from the chassis holding into the diff, which I will do later on. So the rear T-bone bumper has just been put back on as well. Again, as mentioned earlier in the video, make sure you use the long screws and get that all put back in place. And these hold up really well actually. And here's the finished product. It's all very hopefully nice and clean. And let's get some wheels on it. We just put some truggy wheels on the Vorza. It looks quite nice, I think. And we'll give you a quick rundown. So it's got the Hara shock towers, a few of the Hara bits, which is the the D8 Hara is the racing version of the Vorza. We've got a 5S battery in there. I normally tape them all up just so, because obviously you're not supposed to use soft cells in these because there's a chance of them exploding, but pretty much everybody does. Again, the rear Hara shock towers. There's quite a few other little Hara bits on there, and the D8 logos. I think you'll agree it looks quite nice and ready for the next bash. Thanks for watching.